The night Riordan showed up at her apartment, Iris had $3.40 in her checking account, a cracked rib she hadn't told anyone about, and a spreadsheet open on her laptop that she'd been staring at for 6 hours without blinking. She didn't hear him knock the first time. The second knock was harder, the kind that said, "I know you're in there," without actually saying anything at all. Iris closed the laptop. She didn't move from the floor. She was sitting with her back against the radiator because it was the only thing in the apartment that still worked, and even then it only worked if you kicked it twice on the left side and held your breath. The rib made breathing complicated. Holding her breath was out of the question. She'd been doing a modified version, short pulls, careful and controlled, for the past 4 days, ever since the guy from the 3rd floor had shoved her into a doorframe over a parking spot that wasn't even hers to begin with. The third knock wasn't a knock at all. It was the door opening. She'd given Riordan a key 8 months ago when the job started. Emergency purposes only, he'd said, sliding it across his desk like it was nothing, like handing someone access to your life was an administrative detail. She'd taken it, gone home, and put a second deadbolt on the inside of her door the same night. She'd forgotten to use it tonight. Voss. His voice in the apartment was wrong, like a language she only spoke at the office suddenly appearing in a place where it didn't belong. Iris turned her head slowly. He was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. She'd left the light on in there, the one above the stove, because the overhead bulb had burned out and she hadn't bought a replacement, and the yellow light cut across the side of his face and left the other in shadow. Riordan looked exactly like he always looked, like something carved out of granite and then taught to wear a suit. He looked at her on the floor and said nothing. "The meeting isn't until Thursday," Iris said. "It's Tuesday. I know what day it is." He stepped into the apartment the way he moved through every room he'd ever entered, like he'd already accounted for every exit, every shadow, every possible threat, and found them all manageable. His eyes moved over the apartment once. She watched him take in the sleeping bag on the floor because the mattress had a spring that hit her ribs wrong. The stack of canned soup on the counter because it was either that or spend money she didn't have on real groceries. The laptop on the floor. The way she was sitting, back straight, one arm braced against her side in a way that looked casual if you weren't paying attention. Riordan was always paying attention. "Stand up," he said. "I'm fine where I am. Voss Riordan." He crossed the apartment in 4 steps. He had long legs. She'd always noticed that, the kind of stride that ate up distance without effort, and crouched down in front of her, not kneeling, crouching, like he was ready to move at any second. This close, she could see the line along his jaw where a scar had healed badly, years ago. She'd never asked about it. You didn't ask Riordan about his scars. There were too many of them and he'd just look at you like you'd said something stupid. "Your ribs," he said. It wasn't a question. Iris felt something cold settle in her chest. "I bumped into something. Which rib? I don't have a medical degree. Which side?" She looked at him. He looked back. He had grey eyes, the kind of grey that wasn't soft, more like concrete, like weathered stone, like something that had been a lot of other colors before it got tired of all of them. "Left," she said. "Maybe 2, I don't know. I haven't had it looked at. Why not?" The question was so simple it was almost insulting. Why not? Like the answer wasn't sitting in her checking account with $3.40 in it. Like the answer wasn't the fact that her health insurance had lapsed 6 weeks ago when she'd forgotten to file the continuation paperwork because she'd been working 90-hour weeks on Riordan's books, and somewhere in there, her own life had stopped feeling like a priority. "I've had worse," she said instead. Something moved across his face. Not sympathy. She didn't think Riordan did sympathy in the traditional sense. Something more like calculation. Like he was running numbers on her the way she ran numbers on his quarterly revenue reports, looking for the columns that didn't balance. He stood up. Iris expected him to step back. He didn't. "Get your coat," he said. "I'm not going anywhere. You're going to St. Clement's." "I'm not going to the hospital, Riordan. I don't need." You have cracked ribs and you're sleeping on a floor in a building that hasn't passed a fire inspection since 2019. You're going to St. Clement's, and then you're going to tell me why your direct deposit has been bouncing." The air went out of the room. Iris looked up at him. "You don't have access to my personal accounts. I have access to the payroll system. That's not the same thing. It told me enough." He said it without heat, without apology, just fact, like he was reading from a ledger. "The routing number you have on file is wrong, has been for 4 months. Every paycheck I've sent you has been sitting in a routing error account at the bank." Iris stared at him. 4 months. 16 weeks. She'd assumed there was something wrong with her math, which was absurd because there was never anything wrong with her math, but she'd been too exhausted to chase it down, too humiliated to call HR, and too stubborn to ask anyone for help. She'd been eating canned soup and sleeping on a floor and working her way through the last of her savings and telling herself she'd figure it out by Friday. "The routing number," she said. "Wrong digit." "A transposition." He paused. "You didn't catch it." She almost laughed. She, who could spot a transposition error in a 40-column spreadsheet in under 2 minutes, who had once found a $250,000 discrepancy in Riordan's offshore accounts that 3 other accountants had missed, who had built her entire professional identity on the fact that she did not make errors with numbers. She hadn't caught it. "I was tired," she said. The words came out smaller than she meant them to. Riordan looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and set something on the floor beside her. A phone, his backup phone. She recognized it, matte black, no case, the kind of phone that didn't exist on any network that anyone could trace. "Call St. Clement's," he said. "Tell them you're coming. Ask for the administrator, not the ER desk. Say Riordan sent you. I'm not going to. I'll fix the routing number tonight. The back pay will be in your account by morning." He said it like he was closing a line item. Done. Filed. Moving on. Iris picked up the phone. She didn't call the hospital right away. She sat with it in her hand and looked at the apartment. Really looked at it. Maybe for the first time in months. The water stain on the ceiling. The window that didn't close all the way. The radiator that only worked if you kicked it. She'd been so busy surviving, she'd stopped noticing how bad the surviving had gotten. "How did you know to come here?" she asked. Riordan had moved to the window. He was looking out at the street below, not like he was enjoying the view, but like he was cataloguing it, like everything was surveillance. "You missed the Tuesday call. I sent a message. I said I was sick. You don't get sick. Everyone gets sick. You've worked through 2 cases of the flu, a torn ligament, and the week your mother died," he said. "You don't miss calls." Iris went very still. She hadn't told him about her mother. She hadn't told anyone at the organization about her mother. She'd filed the bereavement paperwork with HR and come back to work in 4 days and not said a word about it to anyone, because what was there to say? Her mother had died the way she'd lived, quietly, in a room that cost too much, surrounded by bills that Iris had been paying for the better part of 3 years. She'd gone to the funeral. She'd come back. She'd kept working. "You read my HR file," she said. "I read everything." "That's..." She stopped. She'd been about to say that's an invasion of privacy, but the words felt hollow sitting in the apartment of a man who ran 3 legitimate businesses as cover for an organization that operated in 14 states and had, on at least 2 occasions she was aware of, made people disappear. Privacy was a relative concept in Riordan's world. "Why?" she asked instead. He turned from the window. "Why what? Why does it matter if I missed a call? You have 6 other people on that accounting team. You have Hargrove. You have the 2 CPAs from the Portland office. You don't need me on a Tuesday call." Riordan looked at her. Just looked, the way he sometimes did across the conference table when she was presenting numbers. That flat, assessing look that made junior associates shift in their chairs and made Iris want to hold her ground out of sheer stubbornness. "Hargrove missed the Delacroix discrepancy," he said. "The Portland CPAs signed off on the Meridian report with an error in column 14. You find things they don't. So it's about the spreadsheets. It's about the fact that I don't have people who do what you do." He paused. "And you were not answering your phone." she called St. Clement's. The administrator was a woman named Patricia, who answered on the first ring and said, without any preamble whatsoever, "Yes, of course, we'll have someone at the door," in the kind of tone that suggested Riordan's name was a form of currency she already knew the denomination of. He drove her himself. She'd expected him to call one of his drivers. Instead, he took the elevator down with her and held the lobby door in the way that men who've been taught manners hold doors. Automatic, without looking, like the gesture cost him nothing. His car was parked directly in front of the building in a no-parking zone. Of course it was. Iris got in and immediately became aware of how different this car smelled from the rest of her life. Leather, something cedar-adjacent, the faint ghost of expensive coffee. She missed coffee. She'd switched to tap water 2 months ago when she'd started really tracking her spending. "You should have come to me," Riordan said. He was watching the road. He drove the way he did everything. Controlled, precise, no wasted motion. And said what? "There's a problem with my routing number, and also I haven't been eating properly for 6 weeks. Yes. That's not a conversation I was going to have with you. Why? Because you're my employer. Because I don't." She stopped. She pressed her free hand flat against her thigh. "Because I don't ask for things. I handle things. That's what I do." Riordan said nothing for a long moment. "You handle my things," he said finally. "You've been handling my numbers, my accounts, my liability exposure, and the Donovan money laundering audit that 3 law firms couldn't close out in 14 months. You handled all of it. In the meantime, your own life was." "I know what my own life was." "I know you do." He glanced at her. "I'm saying you shouldn't have had to. At St. Clement's, nobody asked her for insurance cards. Nobody mentioned co-pays. A doctor came and went, young, efficient, with the practiced calm of someone who'd spent time treating people who didn't want to be there, and confirmed what Iris had already suspected. 2 cracked ribs, 1 bruised. Nothing that required intervention. Rest. Anti-inflammatories. No sleeping on floors. Not for at least 6 weeks, the doctor said. Noted, Iris said. She was sitting on the exam table in a paper gown, which she hated, and Riordan was in the corner of the room not being asked to leave, which the doctor had clearly decided not to pursue after looking at him once. He was looking at his phone, or pretending to. She couldn't tell. "The man who did this," Riordan said when the doctor had stepped out. Iris looked at him. "It was a parking dispute. I know what you said." "It was nothing. He was angry and I was in the way. It won't happen again." "No," Riordan said. "It won't." There was something in his voice that Iris filed away and decided not to examine too closely. She'd worked for him long enough to know the difference between the things he said and the things he meant. Sometimes they were the same. Sometimes there was a space between them wide enough to fit a body. "I don't want you handling it," she said. "I know what you want, Riordan Voss." He looked up from the phone. "I'm not going to do anything that requires your permission, but I'm also not going to do nothing." She let it go. She was too tired to push it, and somewhere underneath the exhaustion and the pain and the fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly worse than it was, she was aware that no one had ever said that to her before. "I'm not going to do nothing." Like she was worth doing something about. She pulled the paper gown tighter and looked at the wall. They gave her something for the pain. She tried to refuse it. Riordan looked at her. She took it. And then there was a wait while paperwork was processed somewhere in the back that had nothing to do with her. And Riordan sat in the one chair in the exam room, and Iris sat on the table, and they didn't talk. It wasn't uncomfortable. That was the thing about working for Riordan. He didn't fill silence the way most people did, with noise and reassurance and words that didn't mean anything. He just sat in it, like silence was a resource he was careful with. "The back pay," Iris said, eventually. "How much?" 4 months. She did the math. The number landed somewhere in her chest alongside the cracked ribs and sat there, warm and strange. 4 months of pay she hadn't received. 4 months of soup and broken radiators and a sleeping bag on a floor. "I should have caught it," she said. "Yes, I'm better than that. I know you are." He said it simply, without softening it or adding anything. Just, "I know you are," like it was already established. like it was a fact he kept in the same file with everything else about her. I should have checked my own numbers instead of, "You were working 18-hour days," he said. "On my accounts, my problems, my exposure." A pause. "It's a reasonable error to make when you're that tired." "I don't make reasonable errors." "You made one." Not cruel, not dismissive, just honest. Was almost harder to take than criticism would have been. Criticism she knew how to handle. She'd been handling criticism her whole life, from a mother who thought she wasn't tough enough, and employers who thought she was too much, and landlords who looked at her resume and her address, and decided she wasn't the kind of tenant they were looking for. Criticism she understood. This was something else. "It won't happen again," she said. "I know." He stood up because there was some kind of noise in the hallway that meant someone was coming back. "It won't happen again because you're not going back to that apartment." Iris stared at him. "Excuse me, I have 6 guest rooms. 4 of them are currently empty. You'll take one until the ribs heal, and you've had a chance to find somewhere better." He said it the same way he said everything, like it was already decided, like the conversation was a formality he was including her in out of courtesy. "You can't just, I'm not asking you to live there. I'm telling you that sleeping on a floor with cracked ribs in an apartment with no functioning heat is not happening. The heat works. You just have to—" "Voss." She stopped. He looked at her with those concrete grey eyes, and she thought about the sleeping bag, and the soup cans, and the $3.40, and the routing number with the wrong digit that she'd been too exhausted to catch. She thought about 4 months of pay sitting in an error account somewhere, doing no one any good. She thought about the fact that he'd noticed she missed a call, that he'd come himself. "The room," she said. "Is this because you need me functional for the Thursday meeting? The Thursday meeting can happen without you. Is it because of the Donovan audit? The Donovan audit is closed." She ran out of practical reasons. That happened sometimes. The numbers ran out and you were left with just the thing itself, unaccounted for, sitting on the ledger with no column to put it in. "Why then?" she said. Riordan picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He didn't answer right away. She watched him settle it across his shoulders. The movement was automatic, habitual. A man who'd worn expensive jackets long enough that putting them on was like breathing. "Because I've watched you spend 8 months making sure my house is in order," he said, "and nobody was doing the same for you." The doctor came back in. Riordan stepped aside. Iris looked at her hands. They were steady. They were always steady. She prided herself on that, the steadiness, the ability to hold things together under pressure without any visible sign that they'd ever been anything other than fine. She breathed carefully around the cracked ribs, short and controlled. The drive back was quiet. Not the apartment, not back to the sleeping bag and the soup cans and the radiator that only worked if you kicked it. To the other side of the city, where the streets got wider and the buildings got further apart, and the car slid through a gate that opened before he had to slow down. The house was nothing like she'd imagined it. She'd imagined something cold, all glass and angles and the deliberate minimalism of a man who'd stripped his life down to function. Instead, it was just large and old and lit warmly from the inside, like a house that had been lived in and hadn't forgotten it. He showed her to a room on the 2nd floor, a real bed, curtains, a bathroom with a door that closed and a lock that worked, and a shower that probably had consistent hot water, which was something Iris hadn't had since March. She stood in the doorway and looked at it and didn't say anything. "The Thursday call," Riordan said, from behind her. "We're looking at the Alcott portfolio. Some of the depreciation schedules don't line up." "I saw," she said. "Column 9. I flagged it 2 weeks ago." "I know. I want you on the call. I'll be on the call." He nodded. Then he didn't leave. She was aware of him standing there the way she was always aware of him, a kind of gravity at the edge of her attention, the way you're aware of a large object even when you're not looking directly at it. "Iris," he said. She turned. He'd never called her that before. 8 months of Voss and quarterly reviews and conference calls and the kind of professional proximity that stayed carefully within its own lines. "I don't make a habit of this," he said. It came out quieter than anything she'd heard from him before. The bored voice was gone. The contract voice was gone. What was left was just a man in a hallway telling the truth because he'd decided to. The routing number was my oversight, too. HR reports to me. I should have caught it before you did. You just told me you knew everything. I do. A pause. I missed this. She looked at him. He looked back. He had the expression she'd seen exactly once before, 3 months ago. At the end of a 14-hour meeting, when the Donovan thing finally closed, when everyone else had left the conference room and it was just the two of them, and a table full of empty coffee cups, and she'd looked up from the last of the papers and found him watching her with an expression that she'd filed away and refused to think about. She was thinking about it now. "Get some sleep," he said. Back to Riordan again. Back to the controlled voice. "The Thursday call is at 9. I know when the Thursday call is." "Right." He stepped back. "Good night, Voss." She almost said good night, Riordan, the way she always did. Instead, she said, "Thank you." He stopped moving. She watched something shift in his face, not dramatically, not the way it would happen in a story, with music and perfect lighting, just a small shift. A column that had been marked pending quietly resolving itself. "Don't thank me," he said. "I'm going to." He looked at her for one more second. Then he turned and walked down the hall, and she listened to his footsteps, even, measured, unhurried, until they disappeared around the corner. Iris turned back to the room. She sat on the edge of the bed, a real bed, with a real mattress, and she was almost afraid to commit her weight to it in case it was something she'd imagined it wasn't. It held. It was solid and soft, and her ribs only hurt a little when she finally carefully lay down. She stared at the ceiling. It occurred to her, lying there in the dark, in a house that belonged to a man she'd spent 8 months categorizing as employer and off-limits, and not a variable she was equipped to account for, that she'd been keeping books her entire life. Every debt, every cost, every column that needed to balance. She was good at it. She'd been good at it since she was old enough to understand that her mother's accounts didn't balance, and someone had to fix it, and that someone had always been her. She'd gotten very good at tracking everything that was owed. She wasn't sure what to do with something that didn't fit in a column, something that looked less like a transaction, and more like someone deciding, simply and without conditions, that she was worth showing up for. The routing number had one wrong digit, one transposition. She'd been carrying the weight of it for 4 months without knowing what it was. Just feeling it, the wrongness, the way things kept not adding up, without being able to find where the error was. Outside, somewhere in the house, she heard a door close. Quiet. Final. The sound of the building settling back into stillness. Iris closed her eyes. For the first time in 4 months, the math felt like it was working itself out.